Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis, picks and previews for week 6 on this Thursday. Landis, I am finding this as we go through and do this every week, that I feel more energized and excited, and I think it maybe makes a better show the less prepared I am.
I think so. You can really just sort of bog yourself down in a lot of research looking into these games, right? And you kind of want to be a little more free-flowing and off the cuff.
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Ian says we're late. It's 12:01. We apologize. But if that's where we are, right, you want them excited for the start of the show. There are 2 games this week where I am picking somewhat, not major upsets. I'm picking teams because I kind of think it's their turn to win. Is that football analysis, Bill Landis?
It's as good a football analysis as anyone else is going to throw. Nobody knows what's going to happen, right? I think that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Disney question, Disney churro or corn dog? Disney churro, always, for Tanner. Okay, that's not what we're here to do, although we could do that. I mean, my 2 dreams are to host a college football podcast. Actually, I have 3 shows I want to host. College football podcast, Living the Dream with Bill Landis, every day, Monday through Thursday at noon, Saturdays, 11 p.m. Landis, are you living the dream doing this?
I'm living the dream. Yeah.
Disney podcast. I'll eventually do that when I'm sweeping up garbage at Disney World when I'm 65. And the other one is I want to host a rewatch podcast of How I Met Your Mother, which I continue to try to pursue, but they don't answer my calls. So that's what we're here to do. We also have an awesome interview. We held it from yesterday because we wanted to make sure we give it the proper amount of time and let it marinate and let you guys have a chance to appreciate it. It's Donovan Ezeiruaku, who is on our show, and he leads the nation in sacks. He has 8 sacks for Boston College. They're 4-1. He had 3 sacks last week in their comeback win against Western Kentucky, including the strip sack in the final 6 minutes that set up the winning touchdown for Boston College. They do not win without him. And then he came on our show, and I had trouble with the audio, and he was super kind and patient. And then I was like, the audio's not working. I'm freaking out. And Landis was like, it's Doug. It's not him. And Landis popped in and fixed it, and we got it going. And he is super cool and super awesome at sacking quarterbacks. And we have a really good interview with him. And Bill, I kind of did with him what we did when we had Will Howard on the show, which is we talked about some specific plays. We talked about his 3 sacks from last week and said, how did you do that? And he broke down the plays. And I love that stuff.
Yeah, I love it too. And I don't love when college football gets talked about in the context of the NFL draft, but I have noticed this week a lot of NFL draft people were like, "Ooh, this Donovan Ezeiruaku guy at Boston College, he's doing a little something."
He is, and you'll talk about it. He's lined up over the left tackle most of the time, rushing from the right edge. He's also then over the right tackle a little bit, and he also is floating a little bit, playing some stand-up, over the guard kind of stuff. He is a very versatile guy who also has some great bend and gets after the passer. That'll be coming along soon. We have a bunch of games to talk about. Big game breakdown later in the show. Ohio State, Iowa. And Landis, you think this maybe is not just the best game in the North, but maybe the best game in college football this weekend, right?
Potentially, yeah. Or at least maybe the most interesting. I know that there is a Texas A&M Missouri is a ranked game. There are some other games that have some intrigue, but I think Ohio State, Iowa is interesting because I think it'll tell us a lot about Ohio State, which we've been waiting for.
Yeah. God forbid that you not rank the team that lost to the team that lost to Northern Illinois. Where would we be if Texas A&M wasn't ranked? We have a lot of other good games to get to, and we're going to do 2 right off the top. That it's the battle of the Pacific Northwest versus the state of Michigan. Isn't this kind of cool, Landis? So we have Washington, Michigan, and we have Michigan State, Oregon, and they're both way out there, right? These are both do you think Michigan State and Michigan could have shared a bus?
I wonder if they did. I bet they did, because they're notoriously very friendly with each other. So I'm sure that they wouldn't mind sharing a 747 out to the Pacific Northwest together.
From the tunnel to the bus, how the Wolverines and Spartans came together and healed through football. Wouldn't you want to be on that bus writing that story?
I don't know that I'd want to be on that bus. If I'm being honest, I don't think I want to get in the middle of that.
It's like you're just trying to go to the bathroom in the back of the bus, and Spartans and Wolverines are punching each other again.
Just throwing fists. Yeah.
I just want to go to the bathroom. We're going to start with Michigan at Washington. It's a 7:30 start Eastern. And Michigan is a 2.5 point underdog in this game, Landis.
They are. Obviously a rematch of the national championship. This is Michigan's first road game. Michigan's first 5 games were played at home. It's the first time in a few years they've had that, so this is a different spot for the Wolverines to be in. Another thing here, and I actually hadn't realized this, although it obviously makes sense given the run that Michigan is on. Michigan has won 24 straight Big Ten games, which is tied for the 4th longest conference winning streak. And like the record is kind of within reach. The record is 30 by Ohio State under Urban Meyer from 2012 to 2015. So there are 24 now, looking for 25 this weekend at Washington. And it is a little like, it's odd to see the number 10 team in the country on the road as an underdog. No, like,
yeah.
The underlying numbers, I think, explain it, as we talked about earlier in the week with Washington. Efficient team, down to down, drive to drive. They can move the ball and they're good on both sides, but their penalties have killed them. Special teams have killed them. Red zone stuff has killed them. And Jed Fish was talking about this earlier in the week. I grabbed this quote from Christian Capel, who covers Washington with his Substack. Jed Fish said, "We're 3 yards away, 9 feet. We've got to convert on 4th and 1 on the 1 against Washington State, 4th and 2 at the 2 against Rutgers, and we'd have 2 different outcomes. And then we're the best story in college football, because then we're a team with 21 new starters and 21 new coaches that are 5-0. Except those things didn't happen, and Washington's 3-2.
He's not wrong. Like, he's not wrong. I think the Washington State loss is on them. And we talked about it at the time. It's a 4th and 1 call, right? Whatever it is, speed option to the boundary. And they ran out of room and it wasn't executed. And again, you can go through. It's always, I mean, it's one of those things. You can't say, well, it was a good call. It's like, well, if it didn't work, it's not a good call, because it's like, well, it hinged on guys executing and they didn't execute when it mattered. But I think that's more on them. The Rutgers game, they missed 3 field goals. Like, they have a pretty good kicker who just missed 3 field goals. And I think Jed Fish is like, he even said that again this week, sort of like, what are you gonna do? So I also want to acknowledge that Benjamin suggested West Side Story in the Detroit airport with Michigan and Michigan State.
I like it.
Yeah. Montori Foster and Will Johnson just like across from each other like that. So this is one of my, I think it's somebody's turn to win. And I think Washington has done it to itself, but it's also had some bad luck. It feels like Michigan should be healthy, right? Is that part of this? Does it feel like Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart, who missed the Minnesota game, should be back?
Yeah, I think so. I don't.
Yeah,
I didn't see anything that suggests that they weren't going to play. Yeah,
that's a big deal. So, like, give me Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson and Jeremiah Hunter in this Washington receiving core against the Michigan secondary. That's going to be a great matchup. I thought Kirk Campbell, the offensive coordinator at Michigan, who's certainly under fire a little bit, used catch-22 in 2 separate answers this week. It felt like, I did not watch the press conference, but I read the transcript, and it felt like the Michigan beat writers like really pushed him on some stuff. So credit to those covering Michigan, because this offense is not functioning for Michigan, and they want to know why. Did he overestimate Michigan's talent level when he predicted in the offseason that the Wolverines would be an explosive offense? No, I don't think so. I think when the plays are there, we've got to make them, and then we've got to put them in situations to make the plays too. Like, they're spinning a little bit, trying to use Alex Orji more in the run game. I think that's a catch-22. Alex getting him really involved in the run game, you're taking the ball out of Kalel's hands. So the idea, like, well, we can't run Alex Orji because we want to give it to Kalel Mullings 70 times a game. I don't know. Like, they're trapped a little bit here still. And I think Washington has been limiting itself, and actually they've been moving the ball, and actually their offense has been pretty good. And I think this is a game where maybe Washington can score a little bit and like Michigan can't keep up.
I think that's possible. So when Michigan lost to Texas, I had expressed some concern about the cornerback spot opposite of Will Johnson. Jair Hill since then, I think, has played pretty well. But this will be a decent test. Like, USC was a good test. USC has some pretty good big receivers. But there's a lot of skill with Washington's offense. So it's possible that the improvement we've seen in the Michigan secondary, like outside of Will Johnson, maybe isn't all that real. So perhaps Will Rogers and Denzel Boston and Giles Jackson can throw it on Michigan in a way that makes it hard for Michigan to keep up. That is definitely on the table here. I am probably believing a little bit that Michigan has gotten some of the defensive stuff figured out, and I don't think Washington has not seen an offensive line like Michigan's, which I don't even think it's fine, but it definitely has not seen a defensive line like Michigan. So I've been worried about Washington's offensive line all year.
I do think it's been maybe better than I expected, but I don't know that it's great.
I don't think it's great, and I think that this might be an opportunity for Michigan to remind us that it's not a great offensive line at Washington. So that's why I'm picking Michigan close in a low scoring game, 21-20. I don't think Michigan looks all that great on offense because why would it? But I just think that Washington won't be able to do much trying to block Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Josiah Stewart. Yeah.
We have the same score for Michigan, which is 21. Michigan has scored 30. They scored 12 against Texas, 28, 27, 27. I think if Washington can get to 30, I'm not sure Michigan's going to get there. So I have Washington winning 30-21. So that's sort of the magic number. Miles Hinton still, I guess, is up in the air. It feels like everybody else is getting healthy for Michigan, but if he went out in the last game on the offensive line. So again, like it is probably an offensive line that Washington hasn't seen, but it's not as good as Michigan's offensive line last year. It's a super interesting game. And by the way, I don't know if people remember this because the Big Ten. It's not like the Big Ten would remind anybody. It's the rematch of last year's national championship game. Isn't that exciting?
It is.
You think if we were rematching a national title game between two SEC teams in the regular season that might get pumped up a little bit?
A little bit. I think perhaps maybe one of the pregame shows would bother to go there. But
can we get for real? The idea is like, and I'm not here. I don't know anything about this. Cal Twitter is a thing. Is that a thing now? Why is Cal Twitter a thing? Yeah. What is that? What is it? I'm on Twitter. It's Cal's not in my feed.
They were doing some pretty funny stuff when Cal was getting ready to play Florida State, and the Cal fans were saying they were going to change the name from Doak Campbell Stadium to Woke Campbell Stadium, which I thought was kind of funny.
Okay.
And they're kind of doing similar stuff, although less so with Miami, because I don't think they're as confident about their ability to beat Miami as they were Florida State.
So game days going to Cal because they have good Twitter
instead of good tweets.
Yeah. Instead of Michigan Washington, which is rematch of the national title game. Everybody's like, I don't know what to do. Where should we go? Let's go to the most ridiculous game. Because honestly, like Cal Miami as a conference game is the most ridiculous conference game in the history of college football.
Yeah, but right? Like I get like ESPN not going to this game because it's whatever, they're not in bed with the Big Ten anymore. But like Fox is going to Penn State for Penn State UCLA. Why?
Yeah. Tony Petiti needed to make a call on this. Could we maybe go to celebrate the fact that the Big Ten has the two teams that were the national title game last year? You know who should be there? It's on us.
Yeah.
If we're going to celebrate the North, we're not going to celebrate a rematch of the national championship game. Failure by KOTN. We'll rectify this next year. Next year, we're going to be, oh my God, we're going to be everywhere. We're going to be at people's houses. We're going to be in backyards. We're going to be walking down highways. All right. The other part of this, the other Michigan versus the Pacific Northwest is Michigan State at Oregon. This is a Friday night game, 9 p.m. Eastern. Michigan State is a 24.5-point underdog. This is Jonathan Smith, the former Oregon State head coach, going back to face Oregon. He was 2-4 against Oregon, which I think for an Oregon State coach isn't too bad, including beating Dan Lanning in 2022 in Dan Lanning's first season there. So I think that's interesting. I was trying to find interesting quotes about that. There didn't seem to be any. I don't think Dan Lanning and Jonathan Smith don't think it's as interesting as we do.
I was looking some stuff up for that too. It was like, oh, Aiden Childs, Jonathan Smith playing Oregon. It's like, nope, nobody cares. But I guess Aiden Childs, I think, did not play against Oregon last year either.
So. Okay. So Oregon has a pretty darn good pass defense. And I think we've been talking, again, when we've talked about Oregon so far, we talked about some things that haven't worked. Jabbar Muhammad, as a transfer from Washington, has played very well at corner for them. Brandon Johnson, as a transfer from Duke, has played very well in the slot. Kobe Savage, as a transfer from Kansas State, has played very well at safety. They're second in the nation in 28 passes broken up this year. They haven't played anybody, though. The quarterbacks that Oregon has faced so far, Jack Lane at Idaho, Maddox Madsen at Boise, Giovanni McCoy at Oregon State, and Ethan Garbers at UCLA. Like, they faced teams who can run it. They faced Ashton Genty. They faced the two-headed monster backfield at Oregon State. Idaho wants to run it, right? But they haven't faced anybody who can throw it. The opposing quarterbacks have thrown for 168, 148, 172, and 112. So Aiden Childs is the best quarterback that Oregon has played. But I don't think that matters. So Aiden Childs has thrown 8 picks. It's tied for the most in the Power 4 with Jalen Daniels. He was 13 of 19 for 167 with a touchdown and a pick against Ohio State last week. I think we're in similar territory here. Aiden Childs is going to get somebody this year. And then in the ensuing years, he's going to get a lot of people, I think. He's going to win games. I don't think it's this week. So I think this is a fairly comfortable, possibly Oregon is happy to get ahead and sit on it and get ready for Ohio State next week. I have Oregon 38-20.
I have Oregon 42-17. Do not love the combination of short week, long trip coming off of a game against Ohio State where Michigan State is already banged up. Michigan State, I just don't think is positioned at all to kind of put its best foot forward here. If it were, I think this could be a mildly interesting game. Not all that dissimilar from what it was last week against Ohio State when Michigan State moved the ball pretty well in the first half, and I think its defense gave Ohio State a little bit of trouble earlier in the game, like trying to get some run game stuff figured out. But I have a hard time seeing Michigan State stacking performances like that, especially when they have to go this far and play on a Friday night. So it's not even. I think people are going to want to compare to the results of this game for Oregon to the results of Ohio State against Michigan State when those two teams play next week. I wouldn't even do that just based off the circumstances with Michigan State. Like if Oregon blows Michigan State's doors off, part of that will be because of Ohio State softening up Michigan State the week before. So like I'm not going to make too much of that if that happens. But I do think it'll be Oregon probably getting up early and just sitting on it and turning its attention to the Buckeyes next week.
You know, I want to check on this now. So Fox is doing this Friday night game with Big 12 and Big 10 teams. And I do think a lot of the Big 10 games, it involves at least one of the West Coast teams because it's a night game. And then that pulls in, okay, well, you can do it at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, and everybody can watch it. But that requires then that somebody has short week-long trip. Unless it's 2 West Coast teams. And so that is something like Washington had it last week. Washington at Rutgers. That's a tough spot for Washington. So now you have it. Now it's the team going out west. So that is something. I mean, it's not fair. It's very hard to do, but TV rules the world. So we both have Oregon fairly comfortably here. Just a partly bad spot for Michigan State. All right. Now we have 7 games we want to run through kind of quickly. And actually, some of these are pretty good games. But we have a lot to do, Landis. The Thursday show is always very full, is it not?
Yeah, we have a lot to get through. It's funny, like, oh, we only have 14 games this week, but it still feels like we don't have enough time to get through. It makes me wonder how we got through 22 games or whatever, 27 games the first week.
I told you I wanted to do 3 hours a day, and you guys wouldn't let me.
Yeah, I think it's for the best for everybody. I saw someone in the chat ask what time the Michigan-Washington game is. It's at 7:30 p.m. Saturday night.
7:30 p.m. Yes, Saturday.
So we're going to start with UCLA Penn State. Is that right?
We are.
Okay. UCLA at Penn State. It's big noon. UCLA, congratulations. You get to play at 9 a.m. on your body clock. I thought we weren't doing this.
Yeah, I thought we weren't doing it either.
But I guess we're doing it. Not only are we doing it, we're doing it for the worst team probably in the Big Ten. So good luck with that. Penn State is a 4-touchdown favorite for a reason. Nick Singleton wasn't spotted at practice on Wednesday, and James Franklin was asked about whatever the reason for that being impacting Nick Singleton's availability for this game, and James Franklin said no, not at this stage, and then wouldn't say anything else beyond that because James Franklin does not talk about injuries if this is an injury situation unless they're long term. So I guess that's something to watch here. Katron Allen obviously is still available. If Nick Singleton can't play, then there'll be two freshmen who would have to step up at running back, Quentin Martin and Corey Smith, who I think Penn State likes a great deal. Quentin Martin played really well in the spring game, and we're talking about that back in April. He had a pretty nice spring game there. And then UCLA might be without its quarterback, Ethan Garbers. That's a little up in the air too, his availability coming off the Oregon game. But I mean, I will monitor the Nick Singleton thing, right? I don't know if that has a tremendous impact on this specific game. I think Penn State wins this one rather comfortably. I have 48-7.
I have 45-14, and I will tell you that Nick Singleton was my Dragon statue pick, and I changed it because I got worried. They did say he was at practice Tuesday. So
he did an interview on Tuesday. He did a Zoom with the media. Yeah.
This Wednesday thing was kind of weird. So we just don't know what it is, but like be on alert, be cautious about Nick Singleton. Again, long term, that would be a really tough. If he's not there, that affects Penn State in a big way because he has been awesome this year. It does not feel like it's going to have a big effect on what's going to happen at noon in this one. Okay, next one is Minnesota USC, 7:30 p.m. Saturday in Minnesota. Minnesota is an 8.5-point underdog, and this is my second game where I think it's somebody's turn to win. And I am picking Minnesota to win this game 31-28. Minnesota is coming off its last two games of playing the Iowa defense and the Michigan defense, who are both top 10 defenses. The USC defense is improved. It is not as good as Iowa and Michigan. And I feel like maybe Minnesota is going to feel like it got out of a phone booth and they can stretch their legs a little bit and have a little bit of breathing room. Again, no Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart for Michigan last week, so that certainly made it not as tough. But I just think, and you talked about this, did they find something with tempo in the second half against Michigan? And I'm like, it's one of those things. You just pick and choose what you think matters. Minnesota came back against Michigan last week and almost won. USC came back against Wisconsin last week in the second half and did win. So now I'm like, aha, part of my genius analysis is USC is going to be fat and happy off their second half comeback because they won, and Minnesota is going to be driven and encouraged by their second half comeback because they lost. That's nothing. That is literally nothing. But I also want to say this. I missed. Where's the line? I had a note about. This is the note.
Or no, it's 8.5.
Oh no, it's a line from the game notes I meant. This is the first sentence from the USC game notes because this is just everyone's so excited to come to the Midwest. Visiting the land of 10,000 lakes, the Trojans are traveling to the home of Prince and the Mall of America for the first time since 2010 as number 11 USC visits Minneapolis to challenge the Minnesota Gophers at Huntington Bank Stadium on Saturday, October 5th. Isn't that nice? People are excited. I love the Mall of America. I'm glad USC is excited to go, and they should go see Prince's house. I don't know. Can you go see Prince's house? That should be a museum, shouldn't it?
Yeah. Do you think Lincoln Riley's going to have the boys watching Purple Rain on the flight over or what?
Heck yes.
Yeah. That'll get you fired up.
And then they're going to lose. So I have Minnesota. Minnesota is incredibly frustrated. And we've talked a ton about teams who stay who they are and teams who transition into trying something new offensively. Iowa's an example of one. Minnesota is the example of the other. And I think Minnesota is like exactly halfway in between. That they are trying to throw the ball more. They kind of think they're a little bit better at it, but all of a sudden the offensive line and the run game have kind of fallen apart. USC last week got a short field because Wisconsin dropped the punt. Minnesota last week had a punt blocked by Michigan. I just think that there have been things that have gone wrong for Minnesota, and I think they might be a little better than people think because they've had some goofy stuff happen. This is a quote from PJ Fleck. Jim Tressel told me a long time ago when I asked, why do you coach college football? Quote, because you never know what's going to happen. And that's exactly the way he said it and walked away. And then PJ Fleck was like, wow. So I'm going to subscribe to the PJ Fleck, Jim Tressel idea of you never know what's going to happen. I'm picking Minnesota as an 8.5-point underdog to win this one 31-28.
I have USC winning 28-24, but that's a cover for Minnesota. And I do think there's a pathway to win here. I do, as you said, wonder about the tempo stuff and whether or not that might start to become more of the identity and not just something that Minnesota did at the end of the game because it was a little desperate against Michigan. Yep. Minnesota has good skill, like Darius Taylor. I know the running game hasn't gotten going, but Darius Taylor, I think, has still found ways to impact games, and you're sort of waiting for him to kind of break through. I agree that Minnesota has caught some bad breaks throughout the year. It's not, and because it's a team with a low margin for error, like those breaks matter, yes. Right? So a lot would have to go right, I think, for Minnesota to win this game. But I don't think USC is a juggernaut. I think the 11 next to USC's name is misleading, even though I think it's a fairly good team. I guess the thing that worries me is what I saw in the second half last week against Wisconsin, which was just USC's size in the passing games. Minnesota couldn't do anything. They were just big man in them in the end zone, just this like high point touchdown catches that I don't know if Minnesota will be any more equipped to deal with that than Wisconsin was. So I have USC, but I actually think this game will probably be more interesting and close than people are expecting.
Wisconsin is saying, can we please stop playing Alabama and USC skill players, please?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Minnesota's like, we'll take the USC skill players. Can we please just stop playing Big Ten defenses that squash us? So that I just think, and USC came to the Midwest once before this year for a Big Ten game and lost at Michigan. And so this isn't as tough, but I just think it's just a little bit of a spot. So anyway, all right. Pitt at North Carolina. This is a noon kick, and Pitt's like a 3-point dog.
I thought Pitt was favored. Is Pitt a dog? I must have wrote that down on my notes.
You talk.
It would make sense if they are. I probably wrote it down wrong. Pitt, since joining the ACC, has not had a great time with UNC. Pitt is 2-8 against the Tar Heels since joining the conference. It has never won in Chapel Hill. It's only 2 wins against North Carolina since joining the ACC, were home overtime wins. So that's like a weird kind of wonky matchup, I think, for Pitt. Pitt was off last week. I think Pitt is rested and getting healthier. Des Reed is expected to play in this game. He didn't play against Youngstown State. Yes. I think that was a little bit of load management. Sean Fitzsimmons, who's a third-year defensive tackle, who I think was projected as a starter coming into the year, but hasn't played yet this year. It sounds like he might return for Pitt. So Pitt's defense getting potentially a little more firepower back. UNC lost last week to Duke. It is 3-2. Got, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, got boat raced by James Madison a couple of weeks ago. Carolina is not a good team.
So they didn't just lose last week. UNC was up 20-0 and lost 21-20.
21-20. Yeah, and like after the James Madison game, people thought like Mac Brown might retire.
Yeah,
and then that game happened. So UNC is not in a great spot. I think this is potential shootout territory because I don't know how good either of these defenses are. And I'm excited to see Eli Holstein and the boys get back out on the field and throw the ball around a little bit. So I have Pitt winning in a high-scoring game, 38-35. Close just because of the history between these two programs and how much Pitt has struggled with UNC.
You were right. I was wrong. Pitt is favored by 3. Okay. I have 34-28 Pitt, and that is North Carolina leading 28-27, and Eli Holstein engineering a final drive in the last 3 minutes to win the game, because Carolina is a team that blows leads and nobody comes back and wins games like Pitt. So
that's it.
Be prepared for this to go across your ticker and Pitt's losing. It's like, they got it. Nardog and Eli Holstein and Des Reed and Poppy Williams and Cade Bell, like they got it. They're good. All right. So Wisconsin, Purdue, noon. Wisconsin's a 2-touchdown favorite. 2 unhappiest fan bases in our fan base happiness ratings from Monday. Did you like that show? I like that show.
I did like that show. Yeah.
Purdue has a new play caller, and their play caller after firing Graham Harrell is Jason Simmons. He's graduated college in 1999, so like he's in his like mid to late 40s. He was a high school head coach in Indiana from 2016 to 2022. 2 years ago, he was a high school head coach, and now he's calling the offensive plays for Purdue this week. He was the Miami of Ohio running backs coach last year. He's an analyst this year, so he's not even a full-time assistant, but they didn't have anybody on staff who had called plays before. None of the other full-time assistants. So this is where Ryan Walters landed. This is one of those, a lot of times it's like, okay, well, you have a firing. It's like, well, let's see who the hire is, because sometimes a firing is more related to the guy you're trying to bring in. And it's like, well, this is kind of but we think we have a great guy waiting. And sometimes it's like anybody but this person. And obviously that is this situation. So I don't think Ryan Walters was sitting around saying, you know what? I think he was like, not Graham Harrell. Who do we got? Who's called plays? And like nobody raised their hand. And he was like, oh my God, what have I done? And it's too late. It's too late to do anything. So that's where they are. Purdue might get a little healthier. Jamal Edrin, who's a receiver who'd been out, could be back. Weird spot. I don't know that it's going to be a magic resurrection of Purdue. So I have Wisconsin 33-17.
I have Wisconsin 24-13. I had not actually put this together. So like I knew that Jason Simmons was going to be the guy who's calling the plays now. Jason Simmons was DeJuan Jones high school coach. I've actually talked to Jason Simmons a time or two.
Oh,
yeah. He was the head coach at Ben Davis in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
So I think I've actually interviewed him a couple times. Yeah. He's a nice guy. Hopefully this goes well for him. I don't have a lot of confidence in that, but hopefully it goes okay. I think Wisconsin wins this one and feels pretty good about itself. I want to see Braden Locke like kind of put two halves together. Like he looked really good in the first half against USC, and then obviously didn't look very good in the second half against USC. Like he was good enough in the first half. It's like, oh, maybe there's something here. So I would like to see some more of that out of Braden Locke in this game.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean, I'm not saying high school coaches can't call college offensive plays. We've seen a lot of people graduate from the high school ranks to the college ranks. This is just an unusual situation. Maybe he'll be great. Good luck to Jason Simmons. Iowa State Baylor.
Yep. 7:30 p.m. on Fox on Saturday night. Big time atmosphere they're hoping for in Ames. It's a whiteout for Iowa State. They're going to have some fireworks before the game. They're going to have a drone show at halftime, I think. So nice. This is a big deal for an Iowa State team that I think is feeling pretty good about itself. Baylor's interesting. I sent my score in to Mike.
Are they interesting?
Yeah,
for real?
Well, because they've played close. They've found interesting ways to lose games. But they have played close, like with Colorado, and then they played had the comeback last week against BYU, like after they were like getting their doors blown off early and came back. Like it's a more functional offense since they switched from Daquan Finn to Sawyer Robertson. And the defense is like not awful. I was going back and forth on this, like whether or not I should pick an Iowa State blowout here, just based off the vibes of that program. The fact that this is a home night game, they are looking for a pretty nice atmosphere. But I actually think Baylor just might be a team that, while it doesn't really beat anyone in the Big 12, might be annoying to almost everyone it plays in the Big 12. So I have Iowa State winning 31-24 because I'll take Rocco Becht and Jaden Nolan, Jaden Higgins, and Abu Sama, and a defense that has been excellent this year for Iowa State. Hasn't allowed either of its last two opponents to reach the red zone. So they're pretty good on that side of the ball. So this could be a squashing. But I have 31-24 Iowa State pulling it out. And maybe the 24 is a late touchdown from Baylor that makes it a little closer than it actually was.
It's a little bit of a high score for Matt Campbell. I'm not sure he loves your score pick.
Yeah, it's possible.
I got 24-10, which is a little more like sit on them, sit on them, do enough offensively. I think Matt Campbell likes 24-10.
He loves 24-10.
I don't think he wants
to win the Big 12 title.
Yeah, I don't even know if he wants to score 30. So like they're good. Like I'm not saying they can't. I do not have the respect for Baylor that you have. They're trying to go. Iowa State's trying to go 5-0 for the first time since 1980. So how awesome would that be? Again, very high in the fan base happiness rankings. They're +7 in turnover margin. Iowa State is, which is 5th in the nation. All right, can you sell anybody on this game? Arizona State, Kansas.
Not really. Kansas going to Arizona State. It's 8:00 on ESPN2 on Saturday night. Arizona State is favored at home by 2.5 field goal-ish, depending on where you look. I'm just gonna keep like picking Kansas to find a back spot. I don't know why. I'm not super confident in it. The one thing is like, oh well, if they just start running the ball more, maybe that'll unlock something for them. Arizona State's run defense is actually pretty good. So I don't know. This is a Kansas pick for me, 28-24, that I'm not super confident in. Lance Leipold getting a lot of questions this week about Kansas's offense and just how poor it's been and whether or not he's going to make any changes. And he said, I believe in what we do and what got us here, and I know what we have to do to improve those on a daily basis. And it's like, okay, that doesn't mean anything. You don't have any ideas about how to get yourself out of this.
The one thing I talked to Lance Leipold about at Big 12 Media Days was weather. And he was sort of saying how, like, you talk to the staff, you're prepared for either thing, but he's like more prepared for snow. It might be 100 at kickoff. I looked at the temperatures for, where is it? Springsdale? Where is it in Arizona? Arizona's in the south. I can't remember that. Tempe. What's the one that's right there by Phoenix, though, that everybody thinks is lovely? Springstown. What's it called? Scottsdale, whatever it's called. So they're gonna sweat, and I think they're in a rut still. So Arizona State's played a couple okay games. I have 34-22 Arizona State. So you are riding with the Jayhawks. I respect it. Yeah. Boston College, Virginia, noon start. BC on the road is getting 1.5 points. They lead the series against Virginia 7-1. Their last two games, they scored in the final 90 seconds to beat Michigan State, in the final 3 minutes to beat Western Kentucky. Virginia's coming off a bye, and they destroyed Coastal Carolina the week before, which is a pretty good win. Actually, they ran for 384 yards in that game. So the Boston College run defense will be tested. Thomas Castellanos missed last week's game for Boston College. Grayson James came in, had a slow start, but then led the comeback in the end after they were down 14. Castellanos has practiced. So, but Bill O'Brien has also said both quarterbacks will be ready. And I think, again, in the spring, we were sort of on alert for, Grayson James is a former starter at Florida International. Hey, I don't know. I would not be surprised if both quarterbacks play in this game for Boston College, whatever that would mean. And I'm not saying Thomas Castellanos lost his job or anything. Grayson James was far from great last week, but they found a way to win. So I'm curious to see how this goes. It's a bit of it's a pretty interesting game. Virginia's 3-1, and their only loss is to Maryland. They kind of blew in the second half. BC's 4-1 and played a good game at Missouri for their loss. So this is two pretty competent teams. I think Boston College is better, but I'm curious about Virginia coming off the bye. I'm curious about the quarterback situation for BC. So I have it close. I have Boston College 24-21.
I have BC winning as well, 27-20. I made my pick, though, thinking that Thomas Castellanos is going to play. Are you how did you factor that into your pick?
Thinking that he will play, but that I just think Grayson James, even though he wasn't great early last week, is a pretty high-level power conference backup as a guy who I do think can play a little bit and has played. So they are clearly better with Thomas Castellanos.
Yeah.
But I think they can game plan enough without him. It is one of those where if you said Thomas Castellanos was abducted by aliens, we weren't going to see him the rest of the year, that would certainly affect my view of Boston College. But for this single game, I'm going to guess he's going to play, but I would also think they might be able to find a way without him, just like they did last week.
I think if you told me that Castellanos was definitely not playing, I would pick Virginia to win.
Okay.
But I'm picking BC by a touchdown because I think Castellanos will play. And I would really like to see Boston College get its run game in shape, because it looked good against Florida State, but it really has not hit since then. And they are significantly worse running the ball. They were 14th in rushing offense last year. Right now they're 59th. Last year they were 7th in EPA per rush. This year they're 90th. It is, and everyone's back. So I don't know why it's not hitting the same way it was last year, or maybe they're not using Castellanos and design runs as much, and that would unlock some stuff. So I just want to see that kind of round back in the form, almost regardless of how this game goes. But I'll pick BC, assuming Castellanos is playing.
Okay. That's it for these picks for now. We still have the big game breakdown with Ohio State and Iowa coming. We have 4 other pretty good games that we're going to lean into a decent amount, including Nebraska-Rutgers, which is just a pretty interesting Northern game this week. But next, after the break, we are going to be joined by the nation's sack leader, Donovan Ezeiruaku. He's coming up next on Kings of the North. Joined now on Kings of the North by Donovan Ezeiruaku, who is playing as well as any edge rusher in the nation. And Donovan, I just rewatched your game against Western Kentucky, and I just told you we're just meeting each other. You've been very patient with some audio issues that I was having. Here's my problem with you.
Okay.
There were 84 snaps that Western Kentucky played offensively on Saturday. You played 77. That is too many. What are you doing? You have to come off the field, man.
Honestly, I didn't even know it was that many snaps. I don't know. I just when the number is called, I go out there to do my job. I do appreciate you for having me on first and foremost. I forgot.
No. I appreciate you. We appreciate having one of the best defensive players in America on the show. And you got hurt for a couple plays, or it would have been 80. Yeah. I don't know that I've ever seen an edge guy play that many snaps at that high a level in a game before. How tired were you feeling, man?
Honestly, I didn't really have time to think about it. I really just wanted to go get the win. But seeing guys like, you hear the stories or you see it on Sundays when you watch guys like Max Crosby, who played the entire game as well. And I'm sure there are a lot of other, defensive players that do the same at that position. And I kind of think about those things when I get tired. If I want to be at the same level as a Max Crosby, I need to be conditioned. And I think that was a huge emphasis for me this past summer, with summer training, summer workouts, and in camp, just like my conditioning. So I've been working a lot on that. So just to be able to play those snaps. So.
Okay. All right. How do you figure that out with your defensive coordinator, with your defensive line coach? Do you ever give them a hand of I need a break for a play or two? Do they try to get you to come out sometimes? Is that pretty much up to you during the course of a game, or how do you decide how many snaps you're going to be out there for?
Well, it's not really up to me, honestly. I know that, when my team needs me, I'm going to be out there. If I am tired, I'm sure I'll let coach know. But the pride and the competitive nature that we have as football players, I struggle sometimes to give them that head tap to let me get a quick one. But
you understand it's a crazy thing to do because they're going up tempo, they're going fast. That's the thing too. It's and you are going, the motor in that game, because we know you've won every defensive award in the nation this week for what you did, 14 tackles and 3 sacks and a comeback win against Western Kentucky. But in rewatching it, and I want to break down some of the plays with you, it was the motor within the skill that just stood out to me, because you're slamming yourself into a tackle. You're chasing down from the backside. You're chasing down running backs. That's the thing too, you had so many run plays that you impacted in a game where you're not just getting after the passer. I could not believe how hard you were going that late in the game. You had back-to-back plays against the run late in the third quarter where you were tracking guys down on plays where I thought maybe this would be a play to maybe not take it off, but give yourself a little bit of a break, and you didn't do that.
No. And yeah, I would say that does speak to, the conditioning as well. But, if I do want to be a player that, plays at the next level, you can't, there's no such thing as taking plays off. It is human nature though. When you're dead tired, to jog. And I think that as athletes, we fight that mental battle a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I say I would. I definitely fight that mental battle, but just trying to just push myself and continue to stay mentally strong. So,
what are the vibes like around Boston College right now? I'll tell you that on our Monday show, we did fan base happiness ratings for all the teams that we covered. And man, Boston College was way up there because it feels like there is an energy within the building, within the campus. How would you describe what's happening with Boston College football right now and the way the students and fans are reacting?
Yeah, there's a buzz. There's a buzz on campus. And Coach O'Brien actually mentioned this before the season even started. He just let us know, guys, there's, we're brewing something here. There's something going on here. We're a lot more fan attention to the program and things of that nature. But it's great to see. In my few years of being here at this school, very few times where we'll play our home opener against a non-ACC team and a packed out student section or the stadium pretty much to capacity. That's happened very few times here at Boston College, but just to have that and it's being consistent for these home games, it's a great feeling. We definitely feed off of that energy as a program. So,
okay, no, it's great to see. We just want college football fans to be happy, and you guys are making Boston College fans super happy right now. Jersey kid, right? From Jersey,
South Jersey, yes sir.
So we're kings of the North. We celebrate Northern college football, and we're so happy when our great Northern high school players stay in the North. Why was BC the place for you coming out of high school?
BC was a place for me because of, their academics, obviously. And they play in the ACC. I think Coach Hafley and staff did a great job in recruiting. Definitely laid out the platform or the plan in which they were going to develop me into the player, so I could achieve my goals. As well as, they definitely made a huge emphasis on the fact that this is a 4 for 40 commitment. And Boston College has such a strong alumni network. And I've experienced that firsthand, with getting summer internships and things like that. And when, it's super duper hard for, Division I college football players to get internships in the summer, I've been able to, get a few opportunities because of that Boston College connect. So yeah, like I said, definitely high academics and playing in the ACC.
Very cool. Very cool. It was great to have you here, man. Thanks for being in the North. So let's talk a little ball. I'm 1% the ball expert you are, but I'm watching all your plays, right? So much of the game you're lined up at right edge rusher over the left tackle, but even maybe the second series or so, you're floating a little bit. You're over the guard on one play, then a little bit you're on the opposite side over the right tackle. How is that determined during the course of the game? How much freedom do you have with that? How much is that you and your position coach figuring out where you should line up?
Yeah, I think our defensive coordinator, Coach Tim Lewis, I think he does a great job of putting people in position to, succeed and to make plays. Obviously, when you have a player that is very disruptive at one specific spot, offenses will tend to key on that area. So being able to, be flexible in my position. So being able to line up over the guard or, float around or, line up on the left side instead of the right side, I think it's extremely important. And I think I know that we'll be doing, a lot more of that just to keep offenses on their toes as well, just so they can't, key in on one specific position on the field. Try to run the opposite way or, send double teams or slide the protection, to my side or, chip blocks with the back and the tight end. So things of that nature.
Yeah, there was, I think, a play they might have completed, a long pass, maybe on third down where you were clearly doubled on that play. And it's they were like, oh, no, let's try to block that guy. That'd be a good game plan. Okay, let's play. How did you get that sack? So 3 sacks in this game. Okay. The first sack and this just the chess match, right? You set up the left tackle and then you drop the spin move on him. Yeah. How right? How long were you setting that up and how do you make the decision of okay, spin moves coming out for the first sack?
So obviously, I do a lot of I watch a lot of film, hours and hours and hours of film, just to prepare myself for, what I'm going to be facing on Saturdays. And I, in the game during, obviously getting a few feels, the first couple of snaps, I noticed that the tackle was kind of setting more on a 45-degree angle, kind of toward at me, if that makes sense, while also keeping his depth. So I noticed there was an opening inside that B gap there. But obviously I'm a speed rusher, and typically the inside move is typically a counter. So obviously I want to, get off the ball and show him speed off the edge, kind of start the game off. And then as I get him to continue to bite outside, then that's when I counter inside and throw the spin move. Okay.
How long have you had that spin move? Did you have it when you got there? Did it take a while to develop it? Because man, you got it now.
Yeah, I would say I had it, but I study a lot of NFL guys. So like a Mac, I don't know why he keeps popping up in my head because he does spin move a lot, but like Max Crosby, he spins. TJ Watt, I'll see them, do the same moves, and I try to implement that throughout practice, and then game day comes. I've worked it a few times, and I'll just kind of instinctual.
Okay. All right. Second sack, I thought was that's effort, right? Because you went outside initially, and initially he had you blocked a little bit, but you didn't stop. You dropped the spin move then as a second effort and get to the quarterback there. What's it like as you're continuing through a play where, okay, maybe the first move didn't exactly beat the guy, but you don't stop?
Yeah, I consider that, and it's kind of maybe like an inside joke between myself and some of the guys. Like it's a coverage sack. So, it was great coverage on the back end. And we talk about this as a defense. There's always rush plus coverage. That's what, creates successful passing defense. So the coverage was really tight on the back end. The quarterback stepped up after he got to his drop point. And like you said, the offensive tackle kind of had me at first, or, he was able to beat me to that spot up the field that I was, racing him to. But just the effort to, the second effort to get back downhill when I know the quarterback is obviously going to step up into that B gap area, maybe to take off or scramble to throw. We kind of knew that going into the game that was the quarterback's MO, to kind of step up in the middle of the pocket. So, just being able to, just come back down and make a play. So.
Yeah, I just thought, and again, this is nothing against that left tackle. That's a gigantic dude. But that late in the game, I read that as like, you've got a little more juice left, right? That's conditioning too, that initial burst, but then you're not stopping. You're not giving up on the play. So we have the spin move, and then we have the second effort coverage sack. I'm still giving you credit. Don't give too much coverage sack stuff, right? I mean, with the corners, you need corners. We get that. But you also did your thing. All right. Third sack, this is speed on the edge to change the game, right? So and again, are you setting that guy up for this speed rush, or is this just, okay, this is my bread and butter. There's only 6 minutes left in the game. The defense needs to make a play. Let's go. What went into that sack?
Yeah, so I would say that was more like a instinctual, reactionary type of play. And I say that because, I wasn't really expecting to rush off the edge or particularly rush inside. I didn't necessarily have a plan for that rush, but obviously all good rushes start off with your get off, and I thought I got a pretty good jump off the ball. I noticed that I was already at the tackle's shoulder hip area, so I kind of just dipped, ripped, and then bent the edge tight. Quarterback stepped up and right in front of my face, so. Obviously, I saw him reach the ball back to kind of throw the ball. And, we're taught as pass rushers, we don't just want a sack, or we don't just want a quarterback hit. We want the ball because, when we get the ball out, it's a sack, it's a TFL, it's a forced fumble. We got the ball, it's a fumble recovery. It pads the stat line a little bit, but it changes the game in a huge way. Yeah. We were able to, get the ball there and then go down there and score. So.
You pat the stat line. You guys won the game because of that play. You're losing 2014. 6 minutes left. Strip sack, recover. Offense goes and punches it in. Yeah. That moment. I like to ask you guys this kind of stuff. Like, you put in all the work. You're there in the winter lifting weights. You're doing stuff in the middle of the night. You're watching film. For that moment. How's that feel? In that moment, on the field, on the sideline, after the game, when all the work leads to a play that wins a game?
It feels great, honestly. It feels amazing, kind of like a dream come true. Those are the plays that you envision yourself making. The nights before games. I would envision it like, how cool would it be if I could change the game by going to go get a strip sack, we get the ball, we score. Like, those are the plays. It's kind of like, a young basketball player who's shooting around, and, they're 3, 2, 1, and they go hit that buzzer beater shot. Like, those are kind of the plays, and that's what it feels like. So it just feels great that I was able to, help out in whatever way I can to, help our team win.
Yeah. Come on, man. All right. So listen, now you just gotta maybe take 10% of the plays off. Like, would that be enough? I want you to get through the season, Donovan, right? I mean, you got a whole NFL career ahead of you, but just like an amazing performance. You must have been a little sore, a little tired waking up on Sunday, but man, right? Were you sore? A little tired?
I was,
but you felt great.
Yeah.
Okay. An amazing
performance. Great,
Yeah, it's worth it, right? I mean, so, what made you love football? Is there a person? Is there a moment? Like, how did you decide this is how I want to spend my time?
Honestly, my parents put me in sports and all different types of sports when I was young. Football, basketball, baseball. Not football initially, but basketball, baseball, soccer, t-ball at the time. As a kid, and I was playing basketball with a kid who was doing his thing in the college football world as well. His name is Keon Sabb. His dad was actually my coach at the time.
The kid who was at Michigan and transferred to Alabama?
Yeah.
That's a guy's a good player. Okay.
So he's a pretty good player. Playing basketball, Coach Antoine, Coach Sab saw that I was, relatively aggressive. He went and actually told my dad, like, hey, I think you should, let him try out some football or whatever. And, we brought it home to my mom. My mom was like, absolutely not. But I think my dad kind of, snuck me out there at a practice. And then from that day, 7-year-old just fell in love with the game. And I joke and say that I chose the game that my mom hated the most. I chose that to try and be my profession. So it's kind of a running joke now, but I truly fell in love with the game. I thoroughly enjoy the contact, being able to actually hit somebody and not, it's not basketball where you hit somebody and it's a foul. And next thing you know, you got 5 or 6, now you're out of the game.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy contact. So that's pretty much how I fell in love with the game.
No offense. I do think you'd be fouling out of a lot of games.
I stopped playing basketball, I think after my freshman year in high school. So
yeah. Like all that thing where you hit the quarterback in the shoulder and you force a fumble, that's a foul in basketball. You can't do that when a guy's shooting a shot.
Flagrant.
But listen, that's what moms are supposed to do, right? Moms are supposed to be cautious, and then the dad sneaks you out and everything works out.
Exactly.
So he's Donovan Ezeiruaku. He had an amazing game for an amazing start to the season for the Boston College Eagles. Congratulations on everything that's happening for you, and thank you so much for giving us some time here on Kings of the North.
Thank you so much for having me again. Thank you.
How about that guy?
I didn't know that he was South Jersey royalty. I appreciate that about him. Williamstown, New Jersey. Very familiar with him.
Yeah. You know who's watching that interview and not too happy? Fran Brown and Greg Schiano.
Yeah.
That's going to be, I love that, like the battle, Northeast recruiting battles. Fran Brown, Greg Schiano, Bill O'Brien. Let's go.
I wonder how much, I'm be curious to see how much Bill O'Brien goes into Jersey. Like Jeff Hafley, a Jersey guy, was obviously doing it a lot.
Yeah. No, I think he wants to. I mean, I think
he needs to. I think you have to. Yeah.
And I think, in talking to some people when I was at BC, it's like, it's one of those things they realize, Minka Fitzpatrick was from New Jersey. And then Alabama came in and said, Minka Fitzpatrick, we're going to get you. And Rashawn Gary was from New Jersey and Michigan. So, like, you lose a Jersey guy to Bama, like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But BC and Syracuse and Rutgers they don't want to lose anybody in that area to each other, which is going to be great.
He mentioned Keon Sabb. They're also from South Jersey. Keon Sabb has 2 younger brothers. I think one's in the 26 class and one's in the 27 class. They're both really good. And the one that's in the 27 class could be like a 5-star, like top 25 kind of guy. So those will be fun recruitments to follow. Yeah.
That's not, I wasn't going to yell at Donovan Ezeiruaku that Keon Sabb transferred from Michigan to Bama, but I'll yell at Keon Sabb about it if you haven't like this. We got to keep the Sabs in the North. You're going to see those clips that we showed, and our producer Mike did a great job of putting those clips in. You're going to see those clips on the draft coverage when he's going very high.
That spin move is going to be, Mel Kiper's going to be talking about that bad boy.
And how good, like that bend on the edge, the speed rush at the end, speed, bend, swipe, strip sack, set up the game-winning touchdown. It's $1 million play, brother. All right. Thanks to Boston College and Donovan Ezeiruaku for doing that. Let's do the big game breakdown. It is a 3:30 game. Iowa is a 20-point underdog in Ohio Stadium. We're going to start with the Ohio State offense versus the Iowa defense. We're going to spend a good chunk of time, both sides of the ball, breaking this down. Bill, what are the key things here?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this game this week, and we did do a big breakdown of this on our Ohio State show. And I've thought a lot about the Ohio State run game against Iowa's run defense, which on paper is definitely strength on strength. And the idea of Chip Kelly schematically like going at it with Phil Parker and trying to find the holes in that Iowa defense, and Ohio State's run game design has been really creative this year. And as we sit here on a Thursday, I'm kind of just in a place of, yeah, that's great, but it probably will just come down to Ohio State being able to throw the ball against Iowa because of the Iowa's given up some big plays in the pass game, gave up some to Iowa State, gave up some to Troy. It's not a bad pass defense by any stretch, but it is a worse pass defense statistically than Iowa typically has, especially when it comes to giving up big plays. And I just wonder if eventually, like, the combination of Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate is going to be too much for Iowa to handle. Maybe it does a good job of stifling Ohio State early on as Will Howard like kind of feels out the game in his first game against this Iowa defense. But I do think the receiver talent against Iowa's secondary, which is still a very good secondary, is probably where the game is decided and ultimately probably won for Ohio State. So I don't like, I'm still excited to watch the run game matchup, but I feel like maybe I've been giving that far too much consideration when perhaps the way for Ohio State, the path for Ohio State lies in its passing attack.
Cooper DeJean is basically the only starter they're missing from last year's defense at Iowa. This is the game where you could use Cooper DeJean, right?
Yeah, they Jermari Harris, the one cornerback for Iowa, has been good this year. Like PFF graded out as one of the best cornerbacks in the country. He's also 24 years old and will probably be guarding 18-year-old Jeremiah Smith, which is hilarious. The other corner spot has been a little more susceptible. Like Sebastian Castro in the nickel is very good. Xavier Wampa, one of the deep safeties, is also a very good player. So I'm not trying to make it sound like Iowa's thrown out a bunch of scrubs in the secondary, because it's not, and it never really does. But I think the question when you're facing a team like Ohio State for anybody, not just Iowa, is do you have enough dudes on the back end of your defense? And I think Iowa has some dudes, but Ohio State, I think, has 3 at receiver. And I just don't know that there are a lot of teams anywhere in college football who have enough to contend with all of what Ohio State is going to throw at you at the receiver position. What I guess raises the question of Will Howard and whether or not he's able to do some more than what he's done to this point, which is a lot of short stuff, a lot of RPO, screens, play action passes. I do think Ohio State will have to get a little more vertical with its passing game against Iowa, and that will be something different for Will Howard, at least this year. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. But I don't know that I love the matchups in the passing game.
Iowa's one loss came this year because they gave up a couple big plays in the passing game against Iowa State. They gave up a 75-yard one-play touchdown to Jalen Noel, and then when Iowa State took over in the final 30 seconds, they hit a slot wheel route to Jalen Noel on Sebastian Castro for a 30-yard gain that set up the game-winning 54-yard field goal for Iowa State, or Iowa would be undefeated, like 2 plays. Honestly, you take away either of those plays, and Iowa's probably undefeated right now. That's not a bad facsimile, right? I mean, that Iowa State passing game wasn't consistent against Iowa, but certainly we've talked about, again, our offseason ratings, the best skill players in the North. We had Iowa 1 and we had Iowa State 3, and we kind of regretted not having Iowa State 2. So Iowa has been tested in that game. Jalen Noel, 5 catches, 133. Jaden Higgins, 8 catches, 68. Rocco Becht was 23 of 35 for 272, 2 scores and a pick. They've seen a version of this. They weren't down by down, taken apart, but Iowa State had enough explosives to find a way to win 2019.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that too is just sort of stylistic preference for Matt Campbell, as we talked about earlier in the show. Like Matt Campbell is very happy winning 24-10. Like I actually didn't go back to look this up, but if I'm remembering correctly, just watching the game, Iowa State shows up like, we're going to establish the run. We're going to try to play some ball control. We're not going to come out throwing it all over the yard. Ohio State might. So like the passing success that Iowa State found in the second half, I don't think Ohio State is the kind of team that's going to try to like feel it out and see if it can eventually get to that in the second half. It might just come out throwing on the first 7 plays of the game against Iowa, and we'll know right away whether or not that's something that Iowa can contend with.
Coming off an off week for Iowa, they've had a week to prep for Ohio State here. Obviously, I mean, it matters on both sides of the ball. Phil Parker getting in the lab, maybe showing something different like that. I mean, Phil Parker is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country and has been for 2 decades. How much do you think that matters that he had an extra week? I
think it matters, but the beauty of Iowa is that it just does the same thing and does it exceedingly well, right? Yeah. So I don't know. I'm sure there are tweaks, right? There are definitely going to be tweaks to the scheme that I think Phil Parker brings to the table here, because that would be a waste of an off week, sort of, if you weren't doing that. But I don't think Ohio State's going to be terribly surprised by what it sees from Iowa's defense in this game. So yes, maybe in some of the ways it might choose to defend the RPO game of Ohio State, which has been pretty deadly through the first part of the season here. But I think Iowa will probably more or less play it like you expect them to, and they'll just hope that they can like out execute you because that's their recipe. And that'll be interesting to watch because Ohio State on the perimeter blocking stuff has been really precise, and that has sort of been the secret sauce to Ohio State's offense thus far is just all the receivers and the tight ends on the perimeter and even the running backs, how well they're all blocking. But Iowa is not a team typically that's going to come in and like get out executed down to down. So that'll be a kind of a fun sort of undercard matchup to watch as how the perimeter blocking goes for Ohio State.
Chip Kelly, offensive play caller, Phil Parker, defensive play caller. This is about as good as it gets in terms of dudes who know how to play the chess match, right?
I think so. I think it's the most compelling chess match on Ohio State's schedule, coordinator versus coordinator. Now that Michigan has turned over its coaching staff, and I like Tom Allen at Penn State, but I like Phil Parker more. So, this will be. And Chip Kelly said that this will be the best coach defense that Ohio State plays all season. So, like he's thinking that way too.
Okay. Other side of the ball, Iowa offense, Ohio State defense. This is a very, it's not surprising, but it's a strange Iowa offense to break down because all of last season, Iowa had 13 rushes of 20 yards or more. They have 14 in 4 games this year, 12 of them by the guy that we have done a segment on believing he should be in the Heisman race, Caleb Johnson. So the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the last 8 years, here's about how many rushes of 20 yards or more Iowa's had. 18, 17, 7, 15, 11, 15, 9, 13. So they're on track. They're going to have like 45. Now, they also, people might figure out how to slow down Caleb Johnson. They probably should work on that. But this is not a down-to-down rushing attack that necessarily is grinding out 6 yards a carry. But it's like having Jeremiah Smith at running back, that they are setting you up for a big play, and they can get it 2 ways. Caleb Johnson will run through you. This is a huge game for Sonny Styles and all the Ohio State linebackers, and then Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs in the secondary at safety. Open field tackling is going to be huge. He will break your tackle. But they've also had some of these big runs, Landis, where they just perfectly execute. They have the 2 tight ends, Addison Estrenga and Luke Lachey, who come as lead blockers. They motion a lot. They are really physical at the point of attack. They'll seal an edge. They'll run to the short side sometimes and get a numbers game on you and have the 2 tight ends make a block on the linebacker and the safety, and all of a sudden there's nobody there. When you watch Caleb Johnson, these big runs, Landis, some of them are him running through people, and some of them are him running through gigantic holes that anybody could go through, and they set you up. And I'm curious about any defense's ability to stop that, but I'm mostly curious about the Ohio State open field tackling on Caleb Johnson.
Yep, that was a big talking point for Ohio State this week. Ohio State's defense has not allowed a run of more than 20 yards this year in any of its 4 games so far. So that's the spot for Ohio State because of the linebacker play. There's new guys like Sonny Styles is playing linebacker for the first time this year. Cody Simon is a returning veteran who I think has played well. Arvell Reese is a second-year guy who's also playing linebacker for the first time this year. Like those are kind of the big 3. I think Ohio State plays a lot of 4-3 in this game, despite being a 4-2-5 base defense. Played a ton of 4-3 last week against Michigan State. I certainly you would expect them to do the same thing against this Iowa attack. And I think Sonny Styles, maybe in particular, is kind of the key guy to watch here because he's had some tackling issues. And then last week didn't have his tackling issues as much as he had, I thought, issues kind of fitting up the run a little bit. And like all that's going to be stressed in this game. I think that maybe the thing that makes you feel a little better about that, if that is a concern, and it would be a fair one, is that Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs are also there to help. And Lathan Ransom, I believe, is the highest graded run defending safety in the country by Pro Football Focus. Caleb Downs has played better every week and had his best game last week against Michigan State. So it's very possible that you can't totally contain Caleb Johnson, but I think Ohio State probably is positioned to keep him from going absolutely nuts in this game in a way that gives Iowa a chance to win. But he probably will break through for a run or 2.
Allowing 2 20-plus runs to Caleb Johnson instead of 5, I think would be a victory for the Ohio State defense.
Yeah.
Pretty good offensive line. Mason Richmond, Bo Stevens, Logan Jones, Connor Colby, Jennings Dunker, all highly graded by PFF. Jennings Dunker is probably the best guy. It shows up in the rewatches is when they are on the right hash, so the right side of the field is the short side, Jennings Dunker at right tackle, sealing the edge, and the two tight ends leading to a numbers game. Like, that is where Ohio State needs to be on alert. It is a huge game for Sonny Styles. And then the passing game is still at times non-functional. Mm-hmm. And so I just did not watch a ton of Troy and is it Illinois State? It was Illinois State, right?
Illinois
was their
State,
first game?
Yeah.
Illinois State. But looking at their games against Iowa State and Minnesota, Cade McNamara on snaps where there was play action or like an RPO, something where you're like, right? It's one of those things. You freeze the linebackers, but also I think a lot of times for certain quarterbacks, it helps you set yourself to have a little fake there. It hurts the defense, and it does help you. 12 of 17 for 103 yards. Like, that's not great, but it's, you're making a couple plays. Non-play action against Minnesota and Iowa State, Cade McNamara is 12 of 31 for 58 yards. That's less than 2 yards per attempt when he is dropping back and reading defenses straight up. There's a lot of checkdowns they are missing in the middle of the field. They are not hitting it at much sideline stuff against good teams. Jacob Gill, the Northwestern transfer, has been pretty good for them. Caleb Brown, the Ohio State transfer, has not played much yet. They do want to throw to the tight ends. There is not a lot there. And also, Cade McNamara has been pretty decent against the blitz because he wants to get the ball out of his hands and he'll take a check down. And then if you blitz him and all of a sudden there's a release guy as the running back is open in the flat and all of a sudden he can run for 10 yards, they'll do that. I think Ohio State, their game plan probably should be don't blitz Cade McNamara. I think Iowa State kind of figured they had a hot start. Iowa did in the Iowa State game. And then Iowa State just started dropping 8 and rushing 3 and do that and make Cade McNamara find passing lanes to beat you. And then also if you blitz, you can get in trouble because they'll run Caleb Johnson right at the blitzing hole. And all of a sudden you've lost a defender in the play too. So I think Ohio State does not have to be super aggressive here. It's one of those things. I mean, just say like, stop Caleb Johnson and make Cade McNamara beat you. It's like, well, of course, but it is surprising. I thought Tim Lester's in for Brian Ferentz. Certainly they're statistically better. They've gone from statistically atrocious as an offense, statistically mediocre. But this part of it, they really have a hard time throwing against power conference teams.
Yeah, I don't think that's really an issue here at all for Ohio State. The thing that I'm interested in from like Jim Knowles schematically, and I'm mostly thinking about the Michigan game, I guess, from 2022. But there have been other times it has felt like where Jim Knowles has put himself in a bind against a team that wants to run the ball.
Yes.
By not maintaining levels within his defense and just like playing everybody really, really pushed up to the offensive line, where like if Caleb Johnson gets 2 yards past the line of scrimmage, he's practically by everybody at that point. So you can't put yourself in those situations if you're Ohio State. And I don't think that Jim knows well. I think he knows that. That's part of the reason why he wants to play 3 linebackers too. So I think he can keep Caleb Downs and Lathan Ransom at a little more depth than perhaps he would otherwise. But it is a benefit, I think, that especially with Ohio State's corners, I don't think the Buckeyes need to feel threatened at all by the way that Iowa is going to throw the ball in this game. It can really put all of its attention on stopping the run game, which is why I think Iowa's going to have a harder time here keeping pace.
And Tim Lester, the offensive coordinator for Iowa in the off week, did say, I maybe wanted to take a few more shots and we kind of decided not to do it. There's more in the playbook, kind of intimating maybe they'll bring it out. And he said, like, we had one and we didn't block it. There's one, they had one in one of the games where like when they called it, you could see it developing and then they didn't block it. And Cade McNamara held the ball and didn't let it go and got sacked. Cade McNamara is also bailing out of some clean pockets. So like he's got a little, there's just some real trouble in the passing game and maybe they got it fixed. But if they didn't get it fixed, they're going to be super one-dimensional. And again, you can have balance without having run pass balance. So maybe they can find balance within the run game and the type of different runs they use. They'll, maybe run some jet sweeps to guys and that kind of thing. But this is going to be primarily, I think, can Iowa's defense hold Ohio State down, and can Caleb Johnson break some big plays and keep Iowa in it? Kirk Ferentz versus Ryan Day. Ryan Day's 1-0 against Iowa 2 years ago. They blew out Ohio State blew out Iowa in Ohio Stadium. That was the day when I asked Kirk Ferentz a bunch of questions in the post game and wrote a very critical column saying that Brian Ferentz should be fired. And it is when Kirk Ferentz later in that week said that he's just glad that he's not me. He said, I'm glad I'm not that guy. And it was kind of a thing. If people remember that was me. If you didn't know that, it's like, hey, who's that guy? It was good. That was me. So that was the last time they played. And that was the only time, right? But Ryan Day was the offensive coordinator when Ohio State went to Iowa City in 2017, and Iowa took them apart. Threw the tight end, picked off JT Barrett 3 times. Kirk Ferentz is 2-9 against Ohio State. 2004 in sort of a weird step back year for Ohio State. Iowa won 33-7, and then again 55-24, just like the best game Nate Stanley ever played, a blowout in 2017. But they've played some other close ones in 9 and 10. Landis, like there was a time when Ohio State and Iowa, with the way those two teams matched up, could be really interesting. And as Ohio State has morphed into the Ryan Day passing attack, and now they're certainly running it more with Chip Kelly calling the plays this year, it has maybe been a little less interesting. But there's a type of Ohio State team that Kirk Ferentz was very competitive with. I'm not sure this is that type of Ohio State team.
I'm not. I think it's probably not. And I also just think that this Ohio State offense, while like it's certainly not as good a quarterback with Will Howard as it was with JT Barrett in 2022, is equipped with a lot of answers with the way that Chip Kelly has designed this thing. So like Iowa's defense is potentially, if not definitely, good enough to take away something from Ohio State. And Ryan Day has talked all season about like, okay, when a defense takes something away, do you have other answers? How quickly can you get to them? And that'll be a good study of Ohio State this week, I think. But I have a decent amount of confidence in this offense's ability to get to those responses, probably more so than I had the last couple of years, when it really felt like if Ohio State couldn't throw the ball, then it was going to have some trouble against some teams. I don't know that this offense is quite built that way, even if Will Howard is not, the best downfield passer we've ever seen.
All right. So what is your pick? Again, it's about a 3-touchdown spread, 20-20.5. What do you got for Hawkeyes, Buckeyes?
I have Ohio State winning 38-10. I think it could be a close halftime score. If there's I think there could be a bit of a feeling out process for Chip, for Will Howard, that maybe keeps Ohio State around 2 touchdowns going into halftime, and maybe Iowa comes out of the off week with something different offensively that allows them to get an early touchdown before Jim Knowles adjusts. So I could sense it being a little tight going into halftime, and then Ohio State pulls away in the second half. So I have the Buckeyes covering, but maybe it's a slow kind of cover pull away, 38-10.
And I don't like to do this. I try to be aware of what the line is. It's not a betting show, but like I don't want my pick to be right on the spread. I kind of accidentally did that. I would, I guess, take Ohio State with the points. I have 42-21 Ohio State. And this is a nod to, I do think Caleb Johnson's going to do some stuff. So 21 is maybe a long touchdown run, maybe another long run that sets up a scoring drive, and then maybe Tim Lester dialed up something, right? Probably a tight end throwback. I would imagine, like, that's like, what are you going to do? You're going to roll the whole offense to the right and throw back to the left and hit a tight end who's open by 10 yards, and that sets up. So I do think enough. Caleb Johnson's good enough so that Iowa's like not dancing with a shutout or anything, but that I don't know that Iowa really ever slows down the Ohio State passing attack.
Yeah, don't you think? Like, I think like Iowa is going to try to get Luke Lachey a touchdown in Ohio Stadium.
Yes, and so people who don't know that, Luke Lachey, the great tight end for Iowa, is the son of Ohio State legend Jim Lachey, who has also been their radio analyst for 25 years and was an All-American at Ohio State, a first-round draft pick with Washington in the NFL as a tremendous player. And then, like, Ohio State kind of didn't recruit his kid.
Yeah, they didn't recruit his kid. They absolutely should have and did not.
And he's turned out to be like a fantastic Big Ten tight end who absolutely would help Ohio State if he was on Ohio State right now. So
he went to high school about 8 minutes from Ohio State's practice facility.
Yeah, and they should. I hope they do. I hope Jim Lachey gets to analyze a touchdown scored by his son in Ohio Stadium, because how cool would that be?
It'd be awesome. Yeah.
All right. those are our picks for that. When we come back, we have 4 more games that we have to run through, including UNLV Syracuse. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Doug and Bill back on KOTN. A couple more games to pick. Forgot to do this off the top. Overall records for the season. I am 104-20. Bill is 124. We are not picking against the spread. I was 1 game better last week, which slightly extended my lead. I was 17-3. Bill, you were 16-4. We were both wrong on Kansas. They lost to TCU. We were both wrong on Utah. Utah lost to Arizona. And then we split on 3 games. You were correct. You picked Texas Tech over Cincinnati. I was wrong. I was right picking Colorado to beat Central Florida. And I was right picking Notre Dame over Louisville. You picked Louisville. You watch those games and you shake your fist at me in your house, right?
No, I don't. I get mad at myself. I underestimated the Buffs. You know what I mean? Also, I got to stop picking Kansas to win.
You do. And also, I will note that Cincinnati, Colorado, Notre Dame, I picked all 3 Northern teams. You picked Texas Tech South, UCF South, Louisville border. So I'm just saying, who really loves the North?
I think it's clear that you do. Yeah. It's fine.
It's not a bit. It's not a bit. I actually thought Colorado was going to win. It is not a bit.
You're right.
But if I have to lean, I'm going to lean. I mean, what am I going to lean? I'm going to lean to Ole Miss. All right. So yeah, 4-game lead for me. We have 2 games so far that we disagree on. Minnesota, USC, where I picked the Northern team, and Arizona State, Kansas, where actually Kansas has played so poorly that I've bailed on them. So I actually picked Arizona. That's how much it takes a lot. 8 picks. It takes a lot. All right. Next one up. Do you think this game is super interesting? Syracuse at UNLV, Friday night, 9 p.m. Syracuse is a 6.5-point underdog against a team that has been all over the college football news the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, UNLV. This game, I was wondering why this game was on the schedule to begin with, especially at this point in the calendar. And I learned why from Alex Kirshner at Split Zone Duo. So both of these teams were supposed to play Army, and then Army joined the American Athletic Conference and had to reshuffle its entire schedule and was just like canceling non-conference games. And it had a series with UNLV that got canceled. It had a game with US or Syracuse was supposed to play at Army this weekend. So that game got canceled as well. So then these 2 teams were sitting there with an open date. So this game was put on the schedule last January. So within the same calendar year, which is possible, college football. You do not have to schedule every non-conference game 15 years in advance. So this game was put on the calendar back in January of 2024. I think this is a fascinating game. Syracuse 3-1 coming off a win against Holy Cross. UNLV 4-0, team that I had in my G5 spot in our playoff predictions earlier in the week. Just boat raced Fresno State last week with a new quarterback, Haj Malik Williams, who is a transfer from Campbell, who took over for Matt Sluka, who was a transfer from Holy Cross, who decided he was going to shut it down for the year due to some NIL discrepancies with UNLV.
What?
You may or may not have heard that story, but there are a lot of people, especially now after that Fresno State game, who think that UNLV is probably better at quarterback now that Matt Sluka has made that decision, and Haj Malik Williams, who threw for 3 touchdowns, ran for another, is running that offense. I think this is 2 pretty high-powered offenses and 2 not very good defenses, and I think it's going to be a shootout in Vegas.
I think everybody is on the UNLV train so hard it is going to break down. People who did not know that UNLV had a football team, people who didn't know anything about UNLV past Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, and Jerry Tarkanian are like, I'm rooting for UNLV because they told that NIL kid to stick it. I went to Vegas one time when I was a kid, and I got a T-shirt that said UNLV, and it had Snoopy dribbling a basketball. I wore that shirt for 8 years. I think it might be in my closet still.
That's a pretty great shirt. You should bring that out. Yeah.
I think for a while I maybe thought that UNLV's mascot was Snoopy, and I didn't really understand like cartoon merchandising. I'm taking cues because I think UNLV is not nearly as good as people think they are. They blew out Fresno State last week, 59-14. But here's the thing about Fresno State. They suck. Fresno State, there was a blocked punt for a touchdown. There was a kickoff return for a touchdown. That's 2 of UNLV's scores. Fresno State threw 4 picks in that game. Fresno State has 9 interceptions this year. It is second in the nation, but they've played Fresno State and Mikey Keene, who I thought was going to be good, and just chucks it to the other team. And Jalen Daniels in Kansas, and Jalen Daniels just chucks it to the other team. So Kyle McCord,
he sometimes chucks it to the other team.
He's got some instinct.
Little loose. He's been a little loose.
As I was preparing my manifesto about this, and it was like they've played 2 quarterbacks who love to throw it to the other team, and then it was like ... and so does Syracuse. And I was like, okay, but not quite as bad. Oh. So I just think this is a good spot. It's a trip. I get it. I think this is a nice reset for Syracuse, right? They had the disappointing loss to Stanford. I actually think getting out of town, I think this can be a really good spot for them. Zeed Haynes, their good receiver, is still dealing with personal issues. He's still out. Justice Ross Simmons, one of their other transfer receivers, should be back. They've had kicker issues. Fran Brown said this week they're going to have 3 kickers competing for jobs. There's been weird. Some of these teams like that have had some real. On one hand, we just see kickers bombing 50-yarders, and then there's some schools where it's like, wow, like multiple missed kicks in the game have really hurt you. And Syracuse had a bit of a kicking issue. I think Syracuse has more good players than UNLV, and I think nationally we're trapped in a moment a little bit with a UNLV bandwagon. So I almost like it more that Syracuse has a loss, because I think it made them buckle down a little bit. So I'll take Syracuse 38-31, but I also agree shootout.
Yeah, I have 42-38. Syracuse still can't run the ball. Kyle McCord threw the ball 50 times against Holy Cross, and I think it's because Syracuse felt like they had to throw the ball 50 times against Holy Cross. They averaged like 3 yards a carry in that game. And if Kyle McCord is throwing the ball 50 times in this game, which I think he might, I just think UNLV is going to pick a couple of them off. You said that they're second in the team in interceptions. Jalen Catalan, the transfer from Texas, leads the country with 4 interceptions. They have another DB who has 2 interceptions. Kyle McCord has thrown 2 picks in each of the last 2 games. He has 6 turnover-worthy plays in the last 2 games. He's getting sacked a lot. UNLV has been a pretty good sack team. I don't think like UNLV is an overwhelmingly good defense, but I think it is an opportunistic, aggressive defense. And I think that eventually Syracuse is going to feed into that and turn the ball over a time or two too much, and UNLV is going to win the game.
Watch it.
I think it's going to be
really
on
Friday night.
Yeah,
a couple good, 2 screens, right? Oregon, Michigan State, UNLV, Syracuse. Good Friday night. All right, next game is Oklahoma State, West Virginia. Oklahoma State is a 3-point favorite. It's a 4 p.m. start. I cannot believe how much we wind up talking about Oklahoma State on this show. I am sick of talking about Oklahoma State, but they have played Kansas State, Utah, and West Virginia in 3 straight weeks. And all I keep coming back to is Alan Bowman is terrible. So I'm taking West Virginia because there's not a single thing I trust about Oklahoma State. They were supposed to have a great running back. They can't run. Alan Bowman, I did this searchable. Just the last 2 weeks, so the 2 games he played against Kansas State and Utah, power conference quarterbacks, only Jack Lausch at Northwestern has a lower PFF grade among power conference quarterbacks the last 2 weeks. Alan Bowman against Kansas State and Utah is 42 of 83 for 3 touchdowns and 4 picks. I don't think now. Here I come with stats, and then you're like, I love your stats, Doug. Let me show why your stats actually back up the opposite point. The whole thing is that West Virginia's secondary has been a real problem, but they started 2 different corners in the Kansas win. They were off last week. Those corners weren't perfect, but they're trying. West Virginia is trying to fix its pass defense. Aubrey Burks who had his best game at safety against Kansas, left on a stretcher, but they just, again, had an off week. Neil Brown said this week that he should be okay. So like they need to get this figured out. Jacoby Spells and TJ Crandall were the guys who started at corner against Kansas. They're searching, brother. Like they are absolutely searching. It has been their Achilles heel, but we've talked about this. Did they find something with Garrett Green in that Kansas comeback? I still think West Virginia is a better team than it has shown. And I think Oklahoma State's not very good. 33-23 WVU.
I'm with you. I agree with basically everything you said there. I have West Virginia winning 35-31. So I'm a little higher scoring for Oklahoma State because West Virginia's secondary does still concern me. But I think it's a big Garrett Green game. Like what Isaac Wilson did against Oklahoma State on the road, and it's not like he was awesome against them, but like he found some space with his legs. He made some throws, and then Avery Johnson went nuts on Oklahoma State last week. And I think Garrett Green is capable of doing what Avery Johnson did to Oklahoma State. So I like Garrett Green to continue to build off of what we saw against Kansas and West Virginia to win on the road.
Good comparison. Northwestern Indiana, the Hoosiers going to the Lakeside Stadium for the Wildcats. 3:30 start on Saturday. Indiana's favored by about 2 touchdowns, Bill.
Yep. Indiana hasn't played in Evanston since 2016, which I thought was kind of odd. 5-0 Hoosiers looking to go 6-0. Like I think they get there. This is the thing that I am still wondering about with Indiana is how it will hold up when it plays teams with decent, even like offensive and defensive line play. And I think Northwestern is that team. Like I think Northwestern is above average, or maybe even just average on offensive line and defensive line, but I still think that's better than everybody Indiana has played to this point.
I don't know if they are on offensive line. I think they are on defensive line. I don't know.
Like there are a couple like Caleb Tiernan's a pretty good tackle. Cooper Lovelace is a decent guard. Like it's not the best offensive line Indiana will play this year, but I think it's the best offensive line Indiana has played so far this year, even if it's not that good. So I think there could be some stuff there for the Hoosiers to figure out. I still have them winning 28-13. Cam Porter, I think might play. He didn't play against Washington. Washington was off.
Like it.
Yeah. David Braun said he's trending in the right direction. So
yeah.
That'll be a big return for Northwestern. And I guess there's a possibility too with Northwestern coming off of a week off that it really dials in on some stuff that Jack Lausch is good at quarterback, and maybe puts forth a little better effort offensively than it did when it played at Washington a couple weeks ago. So we'll see, but I still have the Hoosiers winning 28-13.
Jack Bailey, who had been the starting center for Northwestern, has an injury that is probably going to keep him out for a while. So like they just have some stuff going on there. This is one of those, again, we sort of talked about like jinx stuff. It's that, Indiana, nobody talked about Indiana football more anywhere nationally than us this week. So like, you just got to be careful. This is a goofy little game in a goofy little stadium against a well-coached team that is not as talented as Indiana, but like just Indiana's got to be on its P's and Q's and not be looking ahead to Michigan like we are. So
Indiana's been sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to talk about it because like that.
Yeah.
It's like it's a goofy little spot.
It's weird
if they're not careful.
Yes, I agree. Indiana also has been like a one of the better big play offenses in the country, and Northwestern has not given up a lot of big plays. It also hasn't played, I think, many offenses equipped to hit big plays, so that's part of it. But I'll be watching for that too. If Indiana can spring big plays like it has all year, then they might run away with this game. But I think it's a little tighter because I think Northwestern's defense is decent.
And the last big northern matchup for us is Rutgers-Nebraska, 4 p.m. at Nebraska. Nebraska's about a touchdown favorite. Nebraska is 6-0 in this series. It's homecoming for Nebraska. Just like going through all the numbers on this, Landis, they are very similar teams. There's a lot here that this is a pretty evenly matched game in a lot of ways. Ty Robinson for Nebraska on the defensive line has played really well. He has 15 pressures, which is among the best in the country for guys at his position. Rutgers they've been fortunate. They've won some close games, and there's some fortune in there, and there's also some winning plays and great coaching and guys gutting it out and finding a way. Here's the thing. In the preseason, I told Greg Schiano that I thought Rutgers was going to go 7-2 in the Big Ten. They've beaten Washington, and I think Rutgers has very winnable games remaining at home against Wisconsin, UCLA, and Minnesota, and on the road at Maryland and Michigan State. That gets you to 6.
Mm-hmm.
If you win those games that are kind of there for you. So then to get to 7-2, they have to win 1 of 3 at Nebraska, at USC, and home against Illinois. This, once again, is just a very doable schedule. No Ohio State, no Michigan, no Penn State, no Oregon. It is mind-boggling, frankly. No Iowa. Like, it is for real. Like, they don't they play USC. But, like, maybe they don't play the 5 best teams in the Big Ten. So anyway, I think Rutgers is good. I think Rutgers is going to have a good record. I don't think Rutgers is going to go 12-0. So now we have officially gone, Landis, from the point of looking for Rutgers wins to looking for Rutgers losses. And if you think Rutgers is going to go on the road and beat Nebraska, where are they losing? I think this might be their toughest game. Unless you think, like at USC, the extra travel or whatever, I don't know. But like these teams are very similar. And Dylan Raiola is a burgeoning star. And Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nair have played really well at receiver. And they have multiple running backs. And they have a good defense. Like, this might be their toughest game. So I'm picking Nebraska because I don't think Rutgers is going 12-0. 26-19 Nebraska. You apparently do think Rutgers is going 12-0.
I don't think that Rutgers is going 12-0. I was trying. We did like a win season or win total show before the season, and I'm pretty sure I picked Rutgers to win this game. So I'm just kind of riding with Rutgers, pulling that upset. They are 2 incredibly they're evenly matched teams, which makes me think it's going to be a close game, which then makes me think Nebraska's not going to win it because it's going to be a close game. So my 24-21 is like again in heartbreaking fashion for Nebraska. Like maybe it's going in to score a touchdown to win the game and something wonky happens. I don't know. Nebraska is good, but I don't feel comfortable picking Nebraska to win a game that I think is going to be tight kind of until I see them do it. And I think it's going to be a tight game.
Yeah. Third down success is similar. Turnover margin is similar. Just like a lot of good football. And again, who would have? This is a good football game. I would watch this. I mean, I'm not saying I would. I am going to watch it. I would advise everybody out there watching and listening to watch this. All right. So of our official picks, I forgot we had different on Washington, Michigan too. So we have 5 picks differently among our official Northern games. 2 more quick ones. You've introduced what we're going to call the Cram It game of the week, is where we pick a Southern game that you can just watch and hope a meteor hits. Not that hurts anybody, but this that, makes both teams lose. Root for both teams to lose. I picked Clemson, Florida State as the game this week because I wanted to pick Florida State to win. I have Florida State 27-23 because Brock Glenn is going to play instead of DJ Uiagalelei because DJ's hurt, right? Is that the deal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think that's
finger injury. Yeah.
That's good for Florida State. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea of Florida State as a 2-touchdown underdog being like, oh, we benched the 5-star transfer we made a big deal about, not benched, but he's not playing anymore, and we got 50% better and beat Clemson, makes total sense. And people are being denied the DJ going against his old team thing because people know he started his career at Clemson. I just think the ACC is weird. Florida State is weird. I'm picking Florida State.
I'm picking Florida State to cover because I like the switch at quarterback. I think Florida State will be better because of that. Clemson has been very good since losing to Georgia. It has not been against tremendous teams, but it does seem like Cade Klubnik has taken a step forward. I think Clemson's defense is pretty solid as it normally is. Brian Wesco, freshman receiver at Clemson, has kind of, I think, unlocked some stuff for that passing attack too. So I think Clemson wins because of that, but I do think we see like the best of Florida State and Florida State keeps it close. But I have Clemson winning by a touchdown, 31-24. And can I add on an additional Cram It pick just while we're talking about it?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. We always have extra room for Cram It games.
Cal's going to beat Miami.
Let's go. No wonder game day went there. We may or may not do it on the show, but you have come up with a special Cram It parlay this week of 4 money line underdogs that if they all hit would pay like 80-1, but would also be a collective cram felt throughout the South, right?
Yeah, it was Cal beating Miami, South Carolina beating Ole Miss, Arkansas beating Tennessee, and then it was A&M beating Missouri, which is not an underdog, but it's like close to a pick.
Okay.
But it was just, it's Miami losing, Missouri losing, Ole Miss losing again, and Tennessee losing.
Okay. I I probably will put $1 on that, but I think potentially like that quite a bit if you take out the Tennessee game. Now that's also the biggest underdog, but those other three would still pay a nice little 3-team parlay if they hit. So but the thing I really appreciate, Bill, is what you do for us and me and this show when you search out cram it opportunities. That means a lot.
I felt pretty good just punching that in on DraftKings. I also bet all those games spread too, so I got it covered on both ends.
Okay, so our last one is our G5 pick. This week it's Miami, Toledo. Again, two teams at the beginning of the year were kind of viewed as the two favorites in the MAC, right?
Yeah, Miami was the preseason favorite to win the MAC, and now Toledo is at least a betting co-favorite with Bowling Green to win the conference. Miami has fallen down a bit in those projections. Ohio's ahead of them. Western Michigan is ahead of them. It's in a bad start to the year for Miami. I don't think the thing people were kind of hanging their hat on with Miami was its defense, and its defense probably has not been quite as good as people thought it was going to be. It's had a really hard time scoring. It has played 3 games against power conference teams, which is worth considering when looking at that. But it beat UMass last week 23-20 in overtime. As we discussed, Toledo beat Mississippi State and then turned around and lost to Western Kentucky. But I just think like Toledo, despite coming off of a loss, is still playing better football. Has a quarterback in Tucker Gleason who leads the MAC in passing efficiency. Brett Gabbert, Miami's quarterback, is 13th out of 14 in the conference in passing efficiency. So there's just not a whole lot going on there. I do think it is tricky at times taking what MAC teams do in the non-conference and then trying to apply it to MAC games once they happen. But I'm going to take Toledo by a fairly comfortable margin. I have 24-14.
And I have 24-17 Toledo. All right. So those are our picks. We now go to our fantasy picks. We each pick one Northern quarterback and one Northern skill player. Once you pick them, you can't use them the rest of the year. It is the battle for the dragon statue, where the winning fantasy person each week gets the dragon statue. And you and I did not meet up in the middle of the night for you to give me the dragon statue back. So I'm assuming I lost last week.
You did lose last week, and I didn't bring it over to my desk. I don't know. Can you see it behind me there, sitting on the shelf? There he is.
Hey buddy, I'll get you back.
Next to Eric Lindros. Yeah. You did not win this week. You had a terrible week. So we both wanted to pick Dylan Gabriel, and then we decided as gentlemen we were going to each pick a different quarterback. So I picked Will Howard, who had 244 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. And you picked Drew Aller, who didn't have any touchdowns and threw for 130 yards against Illinois. But then you also had Micah Bernard from Utah, or Mekhi Bernard, excuse me, who had only 91 rushing yards and didn't score a touchdown. And I had Kalel Mullings, who had 111 rushing yards and scored twice. So I won big, 47.3-16. It was by far your worst week of picking fantasy, and I think maybe my best week or my second best week. So just two dynamics there that didn't quite match up well for you.
Absolutely smoked.
Yeah.
Smoked. Okay.
We also, I sent my picks to Mike, and I said, here are my picks. And I really knew when Doug picks the same quarterback as me, I'll change my pick. So I originally had Eli Holstein playing against North Carolina, and then Mike said Doug picked Eli. I was like, all right, I'll change mine. So I'm going with Garrett Green this week. Against Oklahoma State. And I'm also going with Omari Evans. A little bit off the board, the receiver at Penn State. UCLA is going to have a ton of big pass plays this year, and Omari Evans is the guy that Drew Aller throws the ball to when they want to take the top off of defense. So I think he might have a couple long, potentially even touchdown plays against UCLA, but I'll roll with Garrett Green and Omari Evans, and I'll let you roll with Eli Holstein, who I think is going to throw it all over UNC.
Oh, that was very nice of you. You knew I was going to pick Eli Holstein. You're in my head.
It was a very obvious pick based off the matchups this week.
Yeah. Okay. So I picked Eli Holstein, and then I originally picked Nick Singleton. But then the reports came out Wednesday night that Nick Singleton didn't practice, and what's the deal? And I didn't want to take a 0 because I thought, so we both liked the idea of the Penn State offense against UCLA. So I switched it, and I was like, I don't know who's good. I guess I'll take this freshman. So I'm taking Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State against the Iowa secondary that we're not sure can cover him. So Eli Holstein and Jeremiah Smith against Garrett Green and Omari Evans. And I think we're meeting up, brother. I'll see you in an alley on Wednesday.
I think we may be. We'll see. I like Garrett Green's legs could keep the dragon statue where it is. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And the thing we're not going to do is root against any Northern player to say, like, I hope Garrett Green runs and throws for 5 touchdowns against Gundy. So if that's how I lose, so be it. I don't want to lose with 6 points or whatever the heck I had last week, though. So, all right, we will see you guys Friday morning for the betting show. Me and Tyler Shoemaker on Bets of the North. There's a lot of you that don't care at all about betting, but we took the over in the Washington State-Boise State game last week, and it hit with 19 seconds left with an absolute meaningless touchdown that I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Not praying. I'm not going to pray for betting. That's not what I'm going to do. But wishing, and it happened. It was a miracle.
It was fun. I was really enjoying it.
It was very, I mean, it's like, what else are you going to do at 2 o'clock in the morning? So we're now 4-1 in our $500 real money bet. So we'll see where we land. Friday morning, that goes up at 5 a.m. if you guys want to pay attention to that. And then Saturday night post-game show. Good. I mean, it's all the games that we just went through, Landis, but there'll be a couple that are kind of ending late, right? We'll have Michigan, Washington, Minnesota, USC, Iowa State, Baylor, and Kansas, Arizona State kind of ticking down as we're doing that show, but we'll have time to really analyze Iowa, Ohio State, Rutgers, Nebraska, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Boston College, Virginia, Pitt, UNC, all those games. All the games we just talked about. I'll have to recite them again. Okay. Thanks to you guys. We went a little long. It's a lot to get into. Man, it wasn't worth having Donovan Ezeiruaku, though. How good was that?
Absolutely.
How good's that guy?
He's awesome.
So good.
Wait to have him
He's
back
awesome. So watch. You have a reason to watch Boston College, Virginia, to watch that guy. See what he's going to do this week. So thanks to him. Thanks to Boston College for the help with that. Thanks to our producer, Mike Urostowski, for making us look good and sound good. We'll see you Saturday live, 11 p.m. on YouTube. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.